Okay, today I want to deal with the question as to why was the offering of Cain rejected? And also in answering that particular question, we'll also see why was the offering of his brother Abel accepted by God. All right. So now let's go into the text. We're in Genesis 4 and 2. Let's do our reading in English first. Then we'll come back and we'll look at our Hebrew text to see if there's anything that particularly highlights this occasion to let us know why exactly was the offering of Cain rejected. All right. Our reading in English, Genesis 4, verses 2 through 5. And again, she, that is Eve, she gave birth to his brother Abel, and that is Cain's brother Abel. And Abel was a keeper of flocks, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. So it came about in the course of time that Cain brought an offering to the Lord of the fruit of the ground. And Abel, on his part, also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and for his offering. But for Cain and his offering, he had no regard. So Cain became very angry and his countenance fell. All right. So here we have the occasion, all right, once again, of Cain's offering being rejected. So now let's move over to our Hebrew text on the other side of the page here, right? And let's examine the text once again, looking for clues that the language itself may bring to us. So, and I'm right here. And it became, and he became, or the idea is, and Abel became what? He became Roesh Son. He became a shepherd of flock. He became a keeper of sheep. And now here's the thing that you have to see. This simply is an identification of his occupation. He became a keeper of sheep, and Cain, Haya, Evid, Adamah. And Cain became what? He became a servant of the ground, or as we particularly, we interpret it, a tiller of the ground. Notice again here, and I want you to bring your attention here. In verse number 2 in English, it says, and Abel was a keeper of flocks, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. Now, although it says but, it seems that there may be some sort of implication or indication that somehow what Cain is choosing to do has a negative connotation by him being a servant of the ground. And then when you remember, we just got out of the fact in Genesis chapter 3, when Adam and Eve were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, remember that they fell into judgment. And one of the things that God had judged was the ground. He said, notice what he said, by the sweat of your brow, you will work the ground. And some tie this issue of Cain being a worker of the soil, a tiller of the ground, with the negative connotation of the curse. And somehow they see something not good at that. But that's not correct. From the very beginning, this type of language, this servant of the ground, is used when God initially put Adam in the Garden of Eden, when there was no sin whatsoever. And God put him there and literally to till the ground and to keep it. Is the identical language, evid, to serve, to serve the ground. So the whole point that I'm trying to make here is this. God had intended for man to work the ground in the first place. The whole issue concerning the curse was not that God cursed man. God never, ever cursed man. It was the ground. So therefore, the labor that man would have to put into the ground in order for it to produce would be very intense. It was intended to be an easy thing. But now, because of Adam's disobedience, it is now hard. Remember, with the sweat of your brow. So the point that I'm making here is there is nothing wrong with Cain being a tiller, servant of the ground. It's just simply his occupation. And that's what the text is stating. Occupation of Cain He works the ground. The occupation of his brother Abel, he's a keeper of sheep. Nothing negative or implied whatsoever. These are their occupation. And here is the point that's being driven by the text. In accordance to their occupation, they would bring an offering to God. You got it? And so, what is the occupation of Cain? He works the ground. So, therefore, he would bring from the produce of the ground. What is the occupation of Abel? He's a keeper of sheep. So, what will he bring? He would bring from his occupation a sheep. So, from each his own occupation, a gift to God. But okay, but let's go into verse number 3. All right, here we are. Yeah, ye mikase. The whole point, and it kind of seems a little difficult. It simply means kind of like, and it came to pass in the course of the days. And it came, or somewhere down the road in time, and let's understand it that way. And it came to pass in time, what? That Cain brought, and here is our key. He brought what? Mipari ha'adama. And that's what we have highlighted here. It's in the yellow. Mipari, that literally translates from his fruit of the ground. That's what he brought from his fruit of the ground. Mincha la Yahweh. He brought from his fruit of the ground an offering to Yahweh. So that's what Cain brought. Now we don't want to get into it too closely right now, but you need to see that. What did he bring? The language is very simple. From his fruit of the ground. All right. But the idea is he is now presenting an offering, mincha, offering from the Lord. And the idea of this, we see later on develop in the book of Leviticus when it talks about the particular offerings of the priest. However, but the point here is this. It appears that this is not in anywhere a offering of sacrifice that deals with atonement. Whenever you deal, okay, I'm going to hit the brakes for a second. This is an offering of thanksgiving. This is an offering of fellowship. So literally from whatever his occupation is, and remember, a tiller of the ground, he brings an offering to God, an offering of fellowship, an offering of thanksgiving, an offering that simply says, I am thankful and I'm grateful for all that God has done for me. Or even in particular, something else. We'll talk about that. For what God has done for me. So he is expressing what? His thanksgiving. Had it been an offering of atonement, then it would have been necessary that it should be an offering of blood. So there had to be shedding of blood. Why? Leviticus 17:11, for without the shedding of blood, the blood gives remission of sin. So therefore, this issue is not about an atonement. It is simply, notice as we have highlighted here in the green, a mincha, an offering to Yahweh. So the idea or the concept is simply an offering of thanksgiving or fellowship. Okay, now let's move to verse number 4 concerning Abel. And Abel bought also Gamhu. He too bought something, right? He also bought. But what did he bring? And here it is. I have it highlighted for you in the yellow. Mebalkaroth. So no. And that literally means from the firstlings, from the firstlings of his flock. That is, okay, let me continue. From the firstlings of his flock and from their fat portions. That's what this is. There and from their fat portions. Okay. So what did Abel bring? Remember what Abel's occupation was. So therefore he would bring a gift of thanksgiving to God from what he produced, which was what? Sheep. So, but when he got ready to choose a sheep to offer to God in thanksgiving, what did he do? He got the best one he had. Out of all his sheep, he chose the best. And from their fat portion, when you deal with the fat portions, once again, you're highlighting the principle, the concept. I'm giving God the absolute best that I have. Now, here we have an indication of the differences or the distinctions. Okay, remember when I said, let's go back to Cain again. And I told you this. Remember I told you the word was mipori, from the fruit, from his fruit of the ground. What's the difference in the offerings of Cain and Abel? The difference is when Cain got ready to give an offering to God from the fruit of the ground, he just got something. He got something. He did not give God the very best. He did not give God the choicest of fruit. And then who do you think God is? And we see also that in the book of Micah, many centuries later, when the priests began to bring in sheep with one eye and sheep with one goat, and God got angry with their sacrifice and he rejected and said, I don't accept this type of foolishness. Who do you think I am? I'm a great king. So here is the same idea in mind concerning Cain. Instead of Cain bringing the absolute best that he could, because this is God himself. This is the God, his creator, to whom he's supposed to be giving thanks to, and he's giving respect unto. And guess what he does? He just gives God a data do. He gives him anything, right? But when Abel, his brother, because of what's going on in his heart and his mind, he chooses to honor God by giving God his absolute best. And that's the difference in it. All right, let's go on. And what happened? And we are right here. We're right here. And Yahweh paid attention to. That means he respected. He respected what? He respected Abel, and to notice minha again. So beautiful concept. So now notice, and I'll slow it down. Minha is being used for Abel's animal offering, you got it, as well as minha is the same word that is used for what? For what Cain brought. So the point that I'm trying to bring about is this. It has nothing to do with the fact that Abel's offering, because when Abel offered up this sheep to God, the animal had to die, and therefore there was blood shed. And once again, what is thought by some is that this was a blood sacrifice, and therefore the only reason why God accepted, because it was a blood sacrifice, and God rejected Cain's offering because it was not a blood sacrifice. But that's not the case. The point that I'm stressing here is the same Hebrew word minha, which literally means offering. The term is applied whether it is to Abel's offering of a sheep or whether it was Cain's offering of fruit of the ground. It doesn't matter. Both of them are minha. What makes the difference is Abel gave the best that he had. Cain did not. Maybe he gave the worst, or maybe he gave something. Well, that'll do, God, or whatever. Or maybe God should be glad that I gave him that. And that's the point of the matter. Okay? Not so much as the blood, but the fact that Abel gave his best. Now, for even greater insight, let's move over to the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, that great text that deals with for by faith. Okay, and we will get some more additional context that the scripture interprets for us. Because when we look at Genesis 4, maybe we don't see all that's taken place. But when God continued to give the scripture, he later provided an interpretation as to what was going on in the mind of Cain, in the mind of Abel, that caused them to give the offerings that they gave, what was happening, the reason why they gave in the manner that they gave. But let's just get to the text. And I think it's just like one verse. Yeah, it's one verse, Hebrews 11 and verse 4. Okay, let's read it in English first, and then we'll come back in our Greek text, and we'll try to see, can we, once again, as we always do, provide even greater understanding of what's going on. Verse number 4, 11, Hebrews 11, by faith, Abel offered to God a better sacrifice than Cain. Notice, better sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained the testimony that he was righteous, God testifying about his gifts. And through faith, though he is dead, he still speaks. All right, now let's go to our Greek text here. Piste is the first word, and I got it highlighted in red. And the reason why I have it highlighted in red is that is our key. Now, of course, we don't have time, because it's not our discussion, to talk about the whole idea or the whole thematic concept. What's the whole point of Hebrews 11, the whole issue of by faith? All right. So let's just contextualize it. By faith, piste. This is the reason. Okay, since I'm here, let's explain it. What was it? What was that internal motivation in Abel that caused him to offer up what? The best of his flock. You got it? What was it that the best of it? But what was the thing lacking? Because whatever it was present in Abel, but it was not present. It was lacking in Cain. And here's the very first word. It is the context of all of Hebrews 11 in this point. By faith. That literally means Abel offered up his particular minha, his offering, in faith. And let me hit the brakes. Okay. Because sometimes this is confusing. Faith simply is a belief. You got it? It's a belief in something. But faith must always have its expression. What do you mean when you say that it's a belief? What was it that Abel believed? What was it that he believed that caused him to act in this way, that caused him to respond in this positive way by offering up the best of his flock? Again, faith, you believe something, but it always has to have a content. That is, what is it he believed? And if we go back, and we don't have time to go back through the literal text itself, but you can remember, it was the promise of salvation that God had promised. Remember Genesis 3:15, when God spoke to the serpent and told him what? There would be a seed that should come from the woman. And what would this seed do? In principle form, he'd bring salvation. All of this stuff that was brought about by sin, the seed would undo it. So therefore, the seed became the hope of salvation. And this is what Abel was believing. So when Abel brought forth his offering, he did it by faith. Faith in what? In what? And the whole context of Hebrews 11 is faith in what God had promised. So therefore, you got to back it up and see, in the time of Abel and Cain, what was it that God had promised? He only made one. It was only one promise that God had made, and it was Genesis 3:15. So therefore, what is he saying? He says by faith. Faith in what? The promise of God that he would bring the seed of salvation. By believing this and looking forward to this. And here's what you got to remember. And let me just digress for a moment. Throughout all ages, from the very beginning of time, ever since the point that Adam fell, that's when man needed salvation. From that point on, we have always been, as Paul said it, for by grace ye have been saved through faith. It's the gift of God, not of works. We have never been saved by what we do. No man throughout any period of time, the time before the giving of the law, that's where we are now in Genesis, the time at the giving of the law, and the time even afterwards, at no point in time has man ever been saved by what he did. He was never saved by the gifts that he brought to God. He was never saved by anything other than simply believing what God had promised. And that whole story develops all the way from what? Genesis 3 and 15, the promise of the seed unto Jesus's death, his burial, and his resurrection. That is the seed accomplishing everything that the seed said. And when we say seed, Messiah, that he would do. Having faith in this, that if you confess with your mouth, what? That Jesus is Lord, believe in your heart, what? That God resurrected him from the dead. What is the end result of that? Now you are saved, not because of what you do, but because of what you believe. What is the point? Faith must always have content. That means something that you're believing in. And in believing in that, you act a certain way. So therefore, what? Abel expressed true faith, true belief in how he acted. And what did he do? He bought pleona thusian. He bought, and notice it, and it uses the term sacrifice. He brought a greater sacrifice, a better sacrifice, Abel, than Cain. And notice, and I don't want to get too much into the text here, but notice it says both what Abel brought as well as what Cain brought. It calls them both thusion, which is the Greek word for sacrifice. So the issue is not, again, so much as offering. In other words, bringing it back to you. It's not so much as Abel brought a blood sacrifice. Cain did not bring a blood sacrifice, and that's why it was not. No. Even in the Greek text, as it says minha for both of them, remember the Hebrew text, here it says thusion, and that's this word in the yellow, right? In reference to both of them. So the whole point has not to do with the differences in the types, but it has to deal with the, highlighted in red, piste, by faith. It dealt with the heart of the giver and not so much as the gift of the giver. The gift was the expression of the heart. What do I mean? Because of what was in Cain's heart, because he did not believe, because he was not thinking on the promises of God. He did not regard that promised seed of Genesis 3 and 15. That meant nothing to him. So therefore, guess what he brought? He brought an offering that was a reflection of what was in his heart. His offering was simply what? From the fruit of the ground. But because the promise of God was what was working in the heart of Abel, and that meant so much to him, and he held on to that promise, he brought what? The best that he could. And therefore, this is the reason why God accepted the offering of Abel. Okay, but let's continue. Because really, we've already given the answer. By faith, a greater sacrifice, Abel than Cain. Abel gave a greater sacrifice than Cain to God, through which, and I was going to take you guys through all of this, but I don't think it's even necessary at this time. Through which, and this is a singular pronoun, through which, and it's feminine. That means it's pointing back to the sacrifice, through which this sacrifice, it was borne witness to him. He was borne witness to be righteous. That means by faith, he was called or considered righteous, right? And again, notice it brings about the principle that we were working through just a moment ago. We are not righteous. We're not righteous simply by what we do. What we do is a reflection of what we believe. And therefore, we are righteous by what we believe. Okay? And we know that we are indeed righteous. Why? Because it's going to come out, it's going to be reflected in what we do. That's why Abel brought it, because of what he believed. But let's finish the text. Right here. And that he was righteous testifying upon to this gift, and God testifying to his gifts, and through this, that is through his gifts, through his sacrifice, him being dead, still he is speaking. So let's wrap it up. When we go back to Genesis 4 and we look to answer the question, what was it about Cain's gift that caused it to be rejected? The answer come in that number one. Notice he just brought of the fruit of the ground. Okay. What did Abel do? He brought the best that he had. Hebrews 11 says, but let me tell you exactly what was going on. He was looking forward to the promise of God. In other words, let's bring these concepts together. Here is Abel looking forward to that promised seed. And what is he saying to God as he brings his offering, the very best that he has to God? He says, oh Lord, I truly thank you for all that you have done for me. And I'm looking forward to all that you have promised those who believe in you. And I'm looking forward to that. And when God saw his heart, he saw his heart, and his offering was a reflection of what was in his heart, looking forward to the promise of God by faith. God looked at that offering and he smiled, which means he accepted that offering, because all of the promises of God, all of the blessings of God, what did the Apostle Paul said? Are in Christ Jesus, is in that promised seed. But Cain did not regard the promise. He thought nothing about it, and therefore it was reflected also in his offering. Not considering these things, not thinking of that promised seed of God, he just simply brought God anything. And notice what the Bible says in the book of Hebrews. Without faith, believing in these things, believing in the promise of God. For without faith, what? It is impossible to please God. So because he did not bring it in the mindset of looking forward to the promise of God, in the mindset of looking forward to this promised seed who would bring redemption, he just simply brought God something. In the absence of faith, God therefore rejected his offering. Or again, what did the writer of Hebrews say? Without faith, it is impossible to please God. Therefore, God took no pleasure in his offering. All right. Thanks for joining me, guys. And listen, by the way, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. And if you want, leave a comment. And God bless you. See you next time.